Hey guys, I'm going to make a 12-inch by 24-inch layout or a 2-page layout today. And I've printed out 14 photos of my sister on the Lord of the Rings set in New Zealand. And they range in size from 3x3 to 6x12. So I'm going to do just a large collage. And one of the things I'm going to do to make this process easier is tape my two pieces of cardstock together so that it stays one 24-inch by 12-inch piece instead of looking at it as two separate 12 by 12 layouts. And since this tape will be on the back, no one will ever see it. So I'm starting with the 6 by 12 photo, and I know I need it to cross the gutter between the two pages, or what's called jumping the gutter. And the only thing you need to do when you do this is just make sure that where you cut it, nothing interesting is happening. So in that photo you see that I have a sign but lots of trees and lots of empty space. So as long as it's not cutting one of the hobbit houses or the sign or the tree, I'm pretty much fine with it being cut. So now I go through and I'm just figuring out where I want to put all of these other little photos. And I want to make sure that every photo I include tells some aspect of the story. So there are 3 photos that won't make the cut in the end. And that's just because everything represented by those photos was represented by something else. So you see the one in my hand right now is not going to make the cut. And that's because there's nothing in it that isn't anywhere else. It's got my sister in it. It's got the scenery in it. It's got the big tree in it. So it doesn't matter. So that one gets cut. The next one to get cut is the one in the bottom right corner of the screen, where you see my sister's just kind of standing there. It's a really artistic photo. She's in a nice pose. It's got a lot of movement, but it doesn't add to the story at all. So that one got cut as well. And then a third one got cut, which was just a picture taken of the hobbit houses. And again, we have plenty of pictures of hobbit houses. So those 3 got cut. So now I'm going to start with my 6 by 12 and adhere it down. And I just used my ruler there to line it up with the edge to make sure that it was lined up well. And now I'm going to punch the edge of this piece of paper from the Today, Tomorrow, Forever pack from Recollections with a scalped border. And this is the Fisker's scalped border punch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually be sticking pattern paper under the photos. This type of layout is not something I do a lot. Because I do like structure and because I do like organization, it's kind of hard for me to do photos in a collage. My comfort zone is to take all the photos I want and put them into a nice grid or strip instead of making a collage of individual prints. But for this layout, it just worked best. There was just no way to get all of these photos in a grid together where some of them weren't just too tiny to see. So that was a walnut stain, which is a cool brown, and I'm just using that to ink the edges of some of the strips that I have from that paper collection. And then I'm just gonna stick it under the edge of the photo. So that it fills in that gap between the bottom of the photo and the bottom of the page. And I will leave about 1/8 to 1/4 inch of brown cardstock showing around all the edges. And that just holds the two things together. So the next photo to go is a photo of my sister and her traveling companion with the movie set sign. So that goes in the upper left corner. And the other really large photos are of the gigantic tree, which is really huge. This photo actually gives you some perspective on how large the tree is. You can see my sister and her friend are hugging it. And so that really shows you how big that tree is. And then here's a picture of one of the hobbit houses, and it gives you a good perspective of how small they are because you see that sheep. So everything I chose to kind of give some sort of perspective on the day. So we have the sheep coming in again. because there's sheep everywhere on the set. And he also goes over the crack, jumps the gutter. So I just made sure to line him up where his head is not going to get cut in half or anything like that. So now I'm going to go through with my craft knife and I'm going to cut the 2 pages apart. And I just do this very carefully, cutting 1 layer at a time. And that way I'll be able to work on each side individually without having to struggle with this big 12 by 24 inch piece. Now that I know that I have all my photos laid out the way I want them, that's going to be that was the most important thing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and fill in the gaps where I have brown. And so I'm just going to slide pattern paper in there, and it's it's going to be a little difficult because I have an ATG, which is a pretty aggressive adhesive. But I make it work. And you'll see me just peel photos up and glue them back down and peel them up and glue them back down, and that's just what I did. I didn't put a lot of adhesive on the back of the photos for that reason, because the ATG is very aggressive. So I just kept the adhesive pretty minimal, and I kept it away from the edges, and that really helps. So now I'm adding the picture of my sister sitting out in front of one of the Hobbit houses. And now I'm going to put more of this butterfly pattern paper down. And I'm just checking how it's going to line up so that I know how to trim it so that the butterflies are all the same height on both pages. I don't want the butterflies all of a sudden to start with a different height. So I want them to stay in rows from page to page. So that's what I was just checking there, so I could trim my second piece so the butterflies would continue in rows. Because I had a tall piece of this paper, not a long piece of this paper. So you can see there how the rows match up. And then I glue it down over the photo for some reason. I don't know why I did that, but whatever. So now I'm going to struggle with it, which I thought about editing out, but then decided to keep it in because why not? You've seen plenty of scrapbooking mishaps the last few days. And then I'm just rubbing, what I was rubbing there is I was rubbing the ATG off the photo. When the ATG is in between 2 pieces of paper, it's really aggressive, but when it's just sitting on top of a piece of paper, it rubs off easily with your finger. So now it's time for this photo to go back down. So now I'm going to add adhesive all the way around the edges. Now that I know exactly where it's going to go, and I know I'm not going to be moving it again. So I'm going to adhere it back to where it was. And that's my sister playing in the dirt outside one of the Hobbit houses. She has the funniest expression on her face. I wish you could see the pictures more clearly. It's like, no, who ruined my house? Or something like that. It's just the funniest expression. So now the other piece of that lamb photo goes back down. Or sheep. I don't know if it's a lamb or a sheep. So next I'm showing you that I've taken one of the pages with a corner, sort of a large corner element, and I've cut it out. And it was adhere. There was also a doily as part of the element, but it was a really spindly doily, and I could tell it was going to be difficult to cut out. And then once it was cut out, it wouldn't have much visual weight, and it would get lost on that brightly colored butterfly paper. So I'm actually just going to cut a doily, and I'm going to adhere that under the element that I cut out. So I'm keeping the doily, but I just used a doily from my stash of dies. And this is from Cherry Linen, and I think it's called French something or other doily. I know it's French something. French pastry. DL102 is what it's called. So now I'm just cutting that so it easily slips under the photo, and it looks great there. So now comes the fun task of poking out all my holes. And I'm not going to make you watch that. So now that I poked out all my holes, I'm just going to adhere my element to the doily, and then I'm going to adhere that whole thing down to the page. So I've got that centered in the doily, and that's how it'll look tucked underneath, and it'll be under one photo and over another photo. And that just is going to give a more layered collage look to all of the photos as well. You can see all those tiny pieces I poked out of the doily hanging out on the page. So now that I'm not going to move that photo anymore, I'm going to go ahead and glue it down on the edge. So now I'm just going to take that piece of that title and adhere it to the other page. And you can see that the doily is taller than the outside page, is kind of poking out in the corner out of the top. It'll just poke out of the top of the page protector, so that doesn't bother me. That's no big deal. So now I'm just marking this blue piece because I need to cut a corner out of it. So I'm just marking where I need to cut my corner, and now I'm erasing my pencil lines. And then I'm going to ink this with the walnut stain again. And I'm being very careful with the walnut stain to just draw a very thin edge. I'm not trying to distress it so much as outline it and give it a shadow to give it more texture or more dimension. So I'm not going deep with it. I'm just catching the very, very edge with the walnut stain. And so now it's time to stick this underneath. I should have used even less adhesive than I did. I don't normally do layouts like this, so first I put it down in line with the photo, and then I realize it has to go under that photo too. So then what I do is I actually line it up with the corner so that I know what I need to lift. And there we go. Now I've got it. And now I can glue that those corners down, because now I know that they're done. So I went ahead and did that. And now I've cut another die from a Lifestyle Crafts It Kit. I think this is the Tab It Kit again. I'm pretty sure. And I just traced it on some blue paper so that the holes would be blue instead of showing through the photo. And then once again, I'm just very carefully giving it a very thin outline with the walnut stain so that it will have that dimension without the added bulk of pop dots. And then I also cut a white oval. It has a nesting white oval that goes with it. That's part of the kit. It was not the Tab It kit, you guys. I can see the Tab It kit sitting there. It is the Label It kit. Again, okay, so part of the Lifestyle Crafts It kits, this is the Label It kit. Okay, so now I'm just gluing that down. And now that I've introduced that bright white from the doily, I'm thinking I need that in 2 more places. So it's not just kind of hanging out there like, hey, I'm a doily. So I'm marking another doily, and I'm going to use it to fill in that kind of gap I have between the pink paper and that photo in the corner. And I like how it does that, but I don't want it to cover the photo, but I also don't want it to just kind of abruptly end with the photo like it's doing. So I'm actually going to add to it just a circle I cut with my Spellbinders out of that blue polka dot paper. And that's also going to give me blue in 3 areas, because I have blue in the title, which I added with some thickers from American Crafts, and I have blue in that bottom left corner, and now I'll have blue in the bottom right corner. So I'm just going to trim that off where it hangs down from the bottom. So I want to decorate that up a little bit. I originally thought about putting some journaling there, and then I was like, I mean, these pictures are just scenery pictures. Doesn't need a lot of journaling other than to say where it is, which I've already said. So I've decided to take a doily die from the Miss Caroline stamp set. And this is actually the same doily that I cut out of the other embellishment that I added, that I cut from the paper. So I'm bringing it back, and I'm just stamped it with the Ranger Big and Bossy embossing ink, and now I'm gonna heat set it with white embossing powder so that it's a white doily. And you can see how kind of spindly it is, and how it wouldn't have really looked good in that corner if I'd kept it up there as part of that other embellishment. And then that was just a little too much kind of just white, so I'm going to emboss it in pink. And so what I've done is I have this wood grain butterfly, and I stamped it in the Big and Bossy ink first, and then I stamped it in the Warren lipstick, Distress ink. And the embossing ink just helps the worn lipstick stick to the clear stamp in a more uniform fashion instead of a distressed fashion. You can emboss just with the distress ink. I don't need the embossing ink to emboss, but distress ink beads up a lot on clear stamps, and adding that embossing ink first can just keep it from doing that too much. So you get more of an image that's true to the stamp than so much distressed. So now I'm just going to add pop dots to the wings of the butterfly and liquid glue to the body of the butterfly so that it maintains dimension when it's sitting on the page. And I'm just holding that center down to make sure it sticks well. And now I'm adding liquid pearls in the color Buttercup, because there's some yellow in the butterfly paper that isn't anywhere else on the page. So I'm going to use the liquid pearls to add the yellow to some places on the page. So I'm going to accent this little banner from that main element, and then I'm going to go around every other hole in that label with the Buttercup as well. So I'm just kind of showing it to you how it looks, where those liquid pearls ended up. And that finishes off the layout.